Okay, welcome everybody. We are back in open session where we will begin with our regular action meeting agenda. I'd like to ask everyone to please rise and participate in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Right. Okay, our first order of business is a public hearing on the LaGrange Area Department of Special Education, LADSI fiscal year 24 budget. We have LADSI representatives Ellie Enbuhl and Nick Peronich here with us tonight to answer any questions from the board. Are they here? Yes,
so
hi.
I'll introduce Ellie. She's director of LADSI, so she's going to explain just really the arrangement between LADSI and District 204. I feel like this is a good thing. We only do this once a year. We have some new board members over the last couple of years, so Ellie can explain kind of why we do what we do, and then obviously go into the public hearing as well.
Okay, absolutely, and I'm representing me and Nick. Nick is on his way, but running a little bit late, so he apologizes. But I'm happy to be here and appreciate the time that LT gives to LADSI really at every board meeting as we're a part of your board packets. And the reason for that is that as a special ed cooperative in the state of Illinois, the school code dictates that cooperatives can run one of two ways. Either as their own standalone district, in which case we would have two boards comprised of both school board members from each of our 15 member districts, as well as superintendents from each of our 15 districts, and run our own business, approve our own bills, so forth. Or cooperatives can operate with a fiscal trustee. And so since LADSI's inception, which was 1957, but I believe LT came into play a little bit later than that, LT has served as our fiscal trustee, which really means that once a year you're required to approve our budget. It basically means you approve our financials. That as taxpayers, as taxpayer representatives, that you are giving us the approval, the stamp of approval to move forward. So it's our budget, it's our list of bills each month that appear in your board packet, and then our financials that appear in your board packet, and our personnel report. That's really it. For other cooperatives that are managed by their fiscal trustee, they're running things like payroll, accounts payable and receivable, things like that. We have the Lyons Township Treasurer's Office to serve that function for us, so and has for many, many years. And so really the only role that LT serves in terms of the fiscal trustee is to oversee those approval processes for our financials. But we do have our 15 board members, Dr. Waterman being one of those 15, that are reviewing. We have regular board meetings where they are in more detail reviewing our operations, and they've already received this budget. We presented a draft to them in March, and then they approved it in May. So that's just a little overview, but I'm happy to answer any questions about that or anything else related to LADSI.
Any questions from the board?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Okay.
We thank you for
Ellie,
all
thanks
the
for being here.
yeah.
We
Thanks for
appreciate it.
coming and
No problem.
yeah.
Now I would go to the, do we have
Yeah.
anyone wanting to comment?
Do we have anyone wishing to comment on the public hearing? Okay. Do we have anyone wishing to comment on the public hearing for LADSI? No, this is this is a public hearing on LADSI's fiscal year 24 budget. So we're going to get to that in a second, though. Okay, at this time, I would like to close the public hearing. Can I have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes. Our next item is public participation. Once again, thank you all for joining us at this evening's meeting. As is the case with all of our meetings, there are two opportunities for the public to share their comments with the Board of Education, one now and one before we adjourn our meeting. For our first public comment session, we will be listening to comments from those audience members who signed up to speak at the start of our meeting. After we finish our agenda items tonight, we will open up our second public comment session, and we will hear comments and feedback from anyone who would like to comment post-hearing the board's discussion and the information shared this evening. If you would like to participate in the second public comment session, please fill out a form during our meeting and give it to Marilyn Muscolino, who will either be near the door or just outside of the door of the room, and we will call speakers in the order in which the forms are turned in. The board appreciates and values hearing comments from our community. Please understand that the board does not engage in dialogue or discussion during our meeting. If there is a specific question or comment that requires follow-up, the appropriate administrator will respond at a later time. Finally, each individual addressing the board will have 3 minutes for their comments, and we really appreciate your cooperation in keeping to this time limit. In accordance with board policies 2:30, and 8:30, we thank you for keeping tonight's meeting respectful and civil for all those in attendance. Marilyn, will you please call our first speaker?
Fred Whiting.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Dawn, I'd like to address this to you. You may recall when I interviewed for the board position that I congratulated you on your appointment and considered it very positive and necessary change. Since then, the board seems to be taking the appropriate first steps to re-engage on the land issue. This new authority allows you to set the agenda and steer the district towards a more transparent and inclusive path. Having the land appraised at current zoning and openly sharing this with the community would go a long way towards building trust. Many people would agree to having this land developed responsibly and are waiting for a commitment of no industrial in Pleasantdale. Regarding closed session tapes, the Attorney General is still reviewing 8 additional closed sessions which were purposely mislabeled and/or exceeded the allowable exception under the law. LT lawyers now claim these were attorney-client privilege as an attempt to avoid the same fate as the Attorney General's conclusion that the January 23rd meeting broke the law. I trust the discussion to destroy the tapes does not include these 8 sessions. Releasing these tapes now would help put this unfortunate period behind us and show good faith that a fresh start is the true intent of this new board. Pursuing alternate legal advice at this point is a very logical step. But let's not overlook how this came to be. Clearly, Dillon and Waterman were in charge of orchestrating this underhanded illegal behavior. Based on this, going forward with any future land use study should exclude involvement from both of them. If not also, a board vote to have them removed from any further involvement with District 204. Waterman, of all people, is the least qualified to accomplish hiring and directing a land use consultant. Clearly, he has proven to be untrustworthy. How can we ignore his past performance and go forward as if nothing happened? I guarantee any business owner deceiving customers in that manner would soon be out of business. We deserve honest and respectable leaders for our hard-earned tax dollars and ones our community and children can respect. It is time for real leadership, and I trust all previous board members recognize the seriousness of their actions and will do everything possible to avoid again falling into the trap of being led to so blatantly deceive those they represent. This new board has an opportunity to heal the wounds that these two have inflicted on our community, and I urge you to exercise your authority. Further, I am requesting an official written apology to the Pleasantdale community. As promised, the board will follow up on questions asked. So, I am officially asking for a response if the board intends to issue a written apology. Consistent with character, Waterman has already indicated he has no intention to do so. This is a golden opportunity to steer the district in the right direction and increase community involvement with all the good LT has to offer. And I would love to be your #1 cheerleader. I wish you all the best of luck. Thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes the public comments for this section.
Okay. And we'd like to call LTEA President Andrew Johannes. for comments?
Yeah.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Today was the first day of the 2023-24 school year. It is always an exciting and busy time, a blend of excitement and nervousness for the students. As we begin the year, the teachers are happy to be back at school meeting our new students. During the past week, the teachers have been busy preparing their classrooms, attending a variety of meetings, and planning lessons that will engage students in their learning. Last week, we welcomed the class of 2027 to LT. What a great group of students, and we are so excited to see the amazing things these students will do over the next 4 years. Thank you to all who helped make the day a success. I'd like to thank Dr. Tyrell for addressing concerns of the school community. The teachers appreciate this and know that the small changes can and will have a positive impact on LT. I'd also like to thank the assistant principals. The teachers are grateful for the partnership with the AP office, which will lead to an improved learning environment for all students to learn, grow, and succeed. The teachers are enthusiastic about the proposed building changes that will come with the bond sales. These changes will truly have a positive effect on the students' experiences at LT. Finally, I would like to thank the board and Dr. Waterman for their continued support for all students. The teachers appreciate your focus on creating the best learning environment for all students. I'd like to say welcome back to everyone and wish everybody a happy new year. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Andrew.
Have a great year.
Thank you so much. Okay, that concludes our first public participation opportunity. As I mentioned, we'll have a second one before we adjourn our meeting. Next, we have student representative to the Board of Education. And moving on, our first student report from Sophia Szymanski. We are very excited to see you here at the start of the school year.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So hi everybody, happy first day of school. I'm so excited to join the board meetings. For a little bit about me, seeing that there's some new faces here, I'm a senior here at LT and I'm involved in a variety of clubs including Model UN, Chemistry Club, French Club, and Polish Club. And in my free time I really enjoy researching and I'm planning on double majoring in chemistry and political science on the global health track in the future. And I'm really looking forward to this school year. Now on to the report. The LT students had a very busy summer filled with various activities. Starting with academics, LT hosted summer school with a variety of intriguing classes including chemistry, biology, physics, culinary arts, and many more. These classes created various projects and also had the opportunity to go on field trips. Chemistry summer school classes visited the Museum of Science and Industry, while the biology summer school classes visited a cancer research lab at Loyola Hospital. For athletics, various sports hosted clubs for younger students, including volleyball, football, cheerleading, gymnastics, softball, and more. Various fall sports have already started training, including golf, football, cross country, boys soccer, girls swimming and diving, girls tennis, and girls volleyball. From August 14th to 19th, a variety of sports, including varsity golf, football, boys soccer, girls varsity swimming, competed at various schools, and on the 19th, all sports had picture day. Congratulations to Quinn Collins for making the All-American Swimmers team for the 200 IM and the 100-meter backstroke. And congratulations to Ella Jean Kelly, Becky Phillips, Audrey Cavalier, and Maggie Adler for making the All-American Swimmers team for the 200-meter and 400-meter free relays. And congratulations to the Varsity Poms for winning second place at the UDA and Junior Varsity Poms for winning first place at UDA. A total of 7 students from both teams won the All-American. And congratulations to the girls golf team for taking second place in the Plainfield North Invitation with a score of 320 points. The first home football game is September 1st, and it's also the senior night for the football team. For extracurriculars and activities, various clubs hosted camps and clinics during the summer, including theater, debate, band and color guard, speech team, and choir. The Save Promise Club participated in the July 4th parade with Moms Demand Action. And in June, scuba students received certifications, with 14 students receiving open water certifications and an additional 6 students receiving advanced open water certifications. Seniors have started to sign up for their senior portraits, and multiple clubs have participated in the June Pet Parade. PRISM participated in the Pride Parade in Chicago, and seniors can also start ordering their Class of 2024 senior apparel now online. On Wednesday, August 30th, the College and Career Center is hosting college application process presentations from 9:30 to 10 a.m. virtually and from 7 to 9 p.m. in person with multiple presentations in the Reaver Center, room 137, and the library. Student Council also has their first meeting on August 24th, which is Thursday, at 6:30 p.m. in room D204 at South Campus. And LT Theater has auditions for improv on Friday after school in North Campus. August 18th was the Freshman Experience Day for the incoming class of 2027, where they got to see South Campus and also see the amazing opportunities offered at LT. And some important notices is that September 7th is the South Campus Open House for parents, and September 14th is the North Campus Open House. And finally, August 23rd, or this Wednesday, is co-curricular night at South Campus in the Field House, where everybody can see what amazing opportunities LT offers for students in both extracurriculars and athletics. Looking forward to a great school year. Thank you.
Wow,
Good job,
thank you.
Sophia.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sophia. That's a constant reminder that even though we many of us had summer brains, summer does not exist here in the same way that it does for many of us. The school stays constantly in motion. The activities stay in motion, and then here we are at the start, and it's just like, wow, it's all a buzz already. So that's excellent. Thank you so much. Yeah. Okay. Next, we will have the superintendent report from Dr. Waterman.
Thank you, President Albert, and again, welcome, Sophia, to your role as student liaison to the board. Welcome back, everyone. Andrew and Sophia both highlighted some really cool things that have happened the last couple weeks, so I won't rehash that, but I do want to just throw a shout out to a few groups or individuals. Jeremy Vertis and Kirsten Bacon coordinated our induction and mentoring program that began on August 7th and ran for 6 straight days, so huge thanks to them for all the work that went into that. Also, just with book pickup over the last couple of weeks, our building leadership team, our bookstores, our business office put a lot of work into all of that goes into registration and getting kids ready for the school year. And then, of course, the South Campus building leadership team and Dr. Tyrell for really an amazing class of 2027 Freshman Experience Day last week. It's probably the first event of the year where you really feel like this is the school year because you have 1,000 students in the South Campus Fieldhouse. So it's been great. And of course, today was really exciting. Over 3,800 students arrived for the first day of school and officially kicked off the 23-24 school year. We won't report official enrollment numbers until that October 1 date. That's the date that the State Board of Education uses, so we'll have our official enrollment then. But by all accounts, I think it's been a positive start to the year. We even have some traditional August heat to contend with this week. Earlier today, I sent out a communication to our community just regarding excessive heat, high humidities that are coming in. It's been hot all week, but I'm really concerned about Wednesday and Thursday. And so we're considering an early dismissal schedule for both Wednesday and Thursday. We committed today. We'll communicate that by the end of the day tomorrow. So we'll obviously monitor the forecasts, and if we haven't seen any adjustments to that, we'll send out a communication tomorrow afternoon. We've certainly, over the last couple of years, made some significant improvements to the amount of air conditioning on both campuses. But with that said, we're still at 44% of rooms at North Campus and 30% of rooms at South Campus do not have air conditioning. Or modernized air ventilation systems. So we're just not there yet in terms of having complete climate control on our campuses. And this excessive heat has us concerned. So again, I look forward to sharing some updates with the community by the end of the day tomorrow regarding our schedule for the rest of the week. Also, as we embark on another year, I think it's really important to highlight our ongoing efforts related to strategic planning. We're beginning the second year of living our strategic plan. And really by focusing on what matters most, and that lives in goals 1 and 2 with the student growth and achievement and the learning environment, the climate, the culture, all the ways in which we support our students. It also emphasizes our amazing staff through goal 3, and certainly places a high value on the partnerships that we have with our families and our community through goal 4, and then the effective use of resources through goal 5. So I want to just briefly share some really exciting things that are happening related to each of these goals. Within goal 1, we're entering year 2 of a comprehensive curriculum review that will include sophomore level courses this year. We're also entering year 3 of our partnership with Equal Opportunity Schools, which is really driving our primary desire to make sure that every course here is representative of our student demographic makeup. We also have a couple of committees through goals 2 and 3 that are going to separately this year explore our school schedule, the latest research on our school schedule, and also on the feedback that's provided to educators through our professional appraisal system. Within goal 4, we're in the process of formalizing some information that we're going to share with our associate schools as it relates to high school readiness. And then in goal 5, we're really excited. We anticipate breaking ground on an approximately 3-year, $30 million renovation to our campuses next summer. And that, of course, all of that is driven by our student, staff, and community feedback over the last year. And certainly as we look ahead to this year, the board will discuss all of this work throughout the year through our strategic plan updates. And again, this is just a really short list of the work that will happen, but all of this, we will continue to center ourselves on this ideal of building a community based on a foundation of equity and inclusion, where every individual is treated with respect and dignity and know they belong. We center our work in that effort. So I think that with all of the activity that's occurring at this time of year, especially in August, I think it's important for all of us to reflect on that strategic planning work and the conversations that are ultimately going to drive long-term change here at LT. So most of all, I'm just really energized and excited to kick off the 23-24 school year, and even more excited about the future here at LT. And then I would end tonight with a FOIA report. The district has received 18 FOIA requests since the June meeting, and those requests are outlined in a memo that is provided in your personal board packet this evening. So thanks again, everyone, and have a great night.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Good stuff.
thank you.
Yeah.
It's all awesome except for the heat.
Yes,
Like, we
I
had the
know,
most
I know,
mild
I
summer,
know.
and yet,
It
Yeah.
looks
Here
like
we
next
are.
week's gonna be better.
I know.
Last week was beautiful.
Of course.
Of course, of
Every
course.
time.
Well, great, thanks so much, Dr. Waterman. Okay, moving on to our unfinished business action items. Tonight, we have 2 items, and they are both policy-related items. First, policy updates for a second reading of Press 112, and for that, we'll go to Ed Piotrowski.
Thank you, President Albert. Today, we are receiving the second reading of the Press 112 update. The board received the first reading of these board updates at the August 7th board meeting. There have been no changes to the recommendation. However, we did provide some additional information regarding a few policies to the Board of Education regarding field trips. There was a question about the different levels of funding, as well as student use of buildings and some of those procedures. That information has previously been shared. There is one modification to one of the policies. At the last board meeting, a question regarding policy 6190, which relates to extracurricular and co-curricular activities, was presented. That question involved the amount of, I believe it was Carnegie units that it was referring to. We did refer back to Illinois School Code, and actually the number that was listed there in that press policy did need to be updated from 20 hours up to 25 hours. We've confirmed that is the correct number of hours, so we have made that change. That equates to 5 classes throughout the day. So our policy of 5 classes still remains. They just use a different conversion model, but it is 25 credit hours. That is the school code policy. Other than that, there are no changes to the recommendations from the first reading to the second reading.
And just real quickly to piggyback on that, that's aligned with IHSA guidelines as well. So IHSA requires students to pass 5 classes in order to be eligible for athletics or extracurricular activities. So the 25 Carnegie units equates to 5 academic classes. And we've always been aligned with that.
Thanks for that clarity.
Absolutely. Happy to answer any questions if the board has any.
Any questions from the board?
I do about 5:230 maintaining student discipline. So it sounds like press is recommending a section in there in the first paragraph where it says the superintendent shall ensure that teachers, other certified licensed educational employees, and then in parentheses, I'm assuming the green is from press, except for individuals employed as paraprofessional educators.
Mhm.
So I'm just curious as to why they would be excluded from following those rules and expectations of holding those standards for students? Or
I don't-
Am I misreading that?
Yeah, I don't think it has to do with maintaining school expectations. I think it's for the actual school code definition of who has the proper licensure to implement consequences and discipline for a student, and that would be administrative personnel with the certificated personnel as well as teachers with certificates. Paraeducators don't have professional educator licenses. They have the paraeducator license with stipulations. So it's a different level of licensure. When the state moved from certification to licensure, that muddied the water somewhat in terms of what that terminology meant. But yes, that is the case. The paraeducators wouldn't be the ones that would be making those recommendations for discipline and going from there. It would be the certificated staff members, which would be teachers and administrative staff.
That makes sense to me. It's the second part of that where it said, follow the Board of Education policies and administrative procedures on student conduct, behavior, and discipline. So the interpretation of this is strictly that they would be the ones that wouldn't be implementing or assigning discipline, but they would still follow the expectations of those other parts I just read.
Yes, that is correct. Absolutely.
The technical responsibility for assigning the discipline still falls on the certificated teacher or staff.
That makes sense. And then, sorry, one more.
No.
Absolutely.
The last sentence in that same policy says, teachers may use reasonable force as needed to keep students, school personnel, and others safe or for self-defense or defense of property. And it's my understanding that the new restraint timeout policies and requirements would not uphold the idea of reasonable force used for the defense of property. So I'm just wondering if, I would assume press or somebody would have thought that that may not be appropriate. So I'm just wondering if we can look into that.
Mm-hmm.
We can
Let's pull that one.
exclude that one, pull it, and we can get more information.
Absolutely.
Yep.
That's all I have.
I also had some questions that I had the chance to talk with Dr. Waterman about with respect to the 6240. It's just the language of the different funding. It's just interesting for it to see in that policy. So I did a quick review of some other policies, and I'm noticing some similarities among a handful of school districts that I looked at, which generally indicates that it's been attorney reviewed. So when Dr. Waterman and I were talking about that policy in general, and just in general related to press policies. I know oftentimes when we get a press update, you all will review it and then pull certain policies out of the gate for attorney review.
For forensic, yep.
But to your point, Tim, thank you for bringing up that great question about 5230. Our attorneys make it clear that press doesn't always capture everything appropriately, and so I don't, 6240, I don't know that we necessarily need to pull it.
Yeah.
I think we can approve it, but
That's one we
it's,
can always review.
it's like,
Yeah.
it's one that I would like to keep on when we're doing some additional review, to have a look at that one. And then the other comment that I had for Dr. Waterman today related to the press policies, and I know this is something that may not exist, but if it would be possible, since when we're doing these readings, this is the second reading, but yet we're really not looking at the copy of the actual policy with any changes that we've made. So you said you were
We
going to
can
look
review
into
other
that.
districts and see how other
And see
districts,
it,
see
yeah.
if we're aligned with how other districts do it. It might not be possible, but if maybe we
Yeah.
can learn
Okay.
something from other districts on how
Yeah,
they
if there's,
handle it.
if there's a
Yeah.
way to do that without it being an inordinate task. It's surprising to me that that within the press delivery system, that they don't have a vehicle for doing that. But, so yeah, other than that, I don't have any additional comments about the policy review.
So, I don't know, the policy, the one that you
So,
referenced,
5230.
5230.
We would pull that, not pull, so basically it would be
Without-
approve press 112 minus
Yep.
5230.
So any additional questions before we go on to action on that? Okay. Can we have a motion to approve press 112 with the exception of policy 5230 and the updates as presented?
So moved. Second.
Marilyn, will you please call the roll?
Member Dillon?
Yes.
Member Brash?
Yes.
Member Donald?
Yes.
Member Thomas?
Yes.
Member Lawrence?
Yes.
Member Peter Daniels?
Yes.
And Member Bear?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Okay, the next unfinished business action item is the second reading and update to policy 130, school district mission, and that's Dr. Waterman.
Yeah, this is just, so policy 130 is our school district mission, and I'm just recommending that the board consider updating this policy to reflect all of the language, the mission, vision, values, and motto within our adopted strategic plan. So the updated policy would reflect that.
And I don't think we had anything other than positive comments about those changes last time, that it followed the strategic plan. Anyone have any additional comments? Okay. Can I have a motion to approve the updates to policy 130, school district mission, as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Marilyn, will you please call the roll?
Member Brunch?
Yes.
Member Nava?
Yes.
Member Thomas?
Yes.
Member Alvarez?
Yes.
Member Vita Daniel?
Yes.
Member Dillon?
Yes.
Member Albert?
Yes. All right, thank you so much. Next, we'll move on to our new business action items. First, we have the adoption of the LaGrange Area Department of Special Education fiscal year 2024 budget. Again, we have our representative from LADSI available to answer any questions. Any questions from the board? Okay, can we have a motion to approve the LADSI fiscal year 2024 budget as presented?
So moved. Second.
Marilyn, will you please call the roll?
Member Nava?
Yes.
Member Thomas?
Yes.
Member Alvarez?
Yes.
Member Vita Daniel?
Yes.
Member Dillon?
Yes.
Member Brunch?
Yes.
Member Albert?
Yes. Okay, thank you. Next, the next action item for consideration is related to the district's legal counsel. As districts' legal needs become more complex, it's become more common for school districts, especially districts of our size, to engage multiple firms to call upon as needed. With this in mind, the Board of Education took the opportunity to meet with 7 legal firms in the months of June and July, and through an interview process has determined that moving forward, the district will be represented by Hodges Louisi and Kriya Bosak in all legal matters. Both firms are highly respected with extensive K through 12 school experiences. Their work will be divided among the two. They will not be duplicative in their efforts. Can I have a motion to improve the engagement contract with Hodges and Louisi as presented?
So moved. Second.
Marilyn, will you please call the roll?
Member Thomas?
Yes.
Member Alvarez?
Yes.
Member Vita Daniel?
Yes.
Member Dillon?
Yes.
Member Brunch?
Yes.
Member Nava?
Yes.
Member Albert?
Yes. Thank you. Can I have a motion to approve the engagement contract with Kriya Bosak as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Marilyn, will you please call the roll?
Member Alvarez?
Yes.
Member Vita Daniel?
Yes.
Member Dillon?
Yes.
Member Brunch?
Yes.
Member Nava?
Yes.
Member Thomas?
Yes.
Member Albert?
Yes. Okay, great. Moving on. Our next item is an information item. It is the consideration of engagement of land use consultant, appraiser, and other professional services related to the Willow Springs property. I'll turn it over to Dr. Waterman, who will share some new information and updates since our last meeting on August 7th.
Okay, thank you, President Albert. So during the August 7th Committee of the Whole meeting, the board publicly discussed the ordinance and the moratorium that was approved on June 5th by the Village of Willow Springs regarding District 204's Willow Springs property. During that same meeting, the board authorized me to gather some additional information from land use consultants, really just regarding the services they provide, the scope of their work, estimated costs, anticipated timelines, and any other additional information that I could glean regarding their work. The goal, as talked about on August 7th, was to assist the board with future decision-making and planning efforts related to the property. So I committed to bringing back some additional information here tonight, and I just want to share some of the information that we've learned. President Albert and Director of Business Services Brian Stashak also participated throughout the process the last couple weeks. I also want to just highlight that President Albert and I had the opportunity to meet with representatives from the Village of Willow Springs earlier today, just to continue the dialogue around the property and our future collaborative efforts. So in the last 2 weeks, we met with 3 firms, all of which are reputable firms with significant experience in the area of land use and site development. I think overall, I learned that there is a wide continuum of services that are available that the board can choose from. And the ultimate choice is going to really depend upon the short-term goals of the board as it relates to the ordinance, but also the long-term goals of the board as it relates to the property itself. On one end of the continuum would involve engaging with a company that's focused primarily on determining the highest and best use of the property, assisting the board with securing a contract with a buyer at the highest and best use, and then assisting the buyer with securing the appropriate entitlements and zoning changes with the village. This would likely be the least costly process, although a cost range hasn't yet been determined or provided. The middle of the continuum involves engaging with a consultant, a land use consultant, that would complete a more comprehensive analysis of the property, probably within a 30 to 60-day timeline. This may include a restricted appraisal completed at the current zoning, as well as the marketability, the advantages, the disadvantages of seeking a range of uses for the property. This would certainly provide the board with some available options to explore, and the deliverables there could include some basic site plans that could be shared with potential buyers. The total cost of this approach is estimated to be $55,000. The other end of the continuum involves engaging with a company that would facilitate really a large-scale, long-term, comprehensive process that could take up to 9 to 12 months. It would involve 3 different phases, with the first phase including community focus groups that would result in a collective report that identifies potential outcomes, feasibility, and opportunity costs of those outcomes. The second phase of that approach could be taking the information that was collected during the first phase to determine what option is best, or to envision what the best use is. And then that third phase really further develops the issues into, or the plans into a preferred plan or a master plan, and that also could be shopped to potential buyers. The total cost of that option is estimated to be about $150,000, and again, take about 9 to 12 months to complete. So I think, just to reiterate, I think the best option really ultimately depends on the board's goal regarding the property. I think each of these options involves some advantages and disadvantages, and I'm interested tonight in just sharing that information and giving the board a chance to discuss each of those 3 approaches to see where the consensus lies, but also what the potential next steps would be.
Okay. So we're going to open it up for board discussion with respect to those 3 scenarios, and knowing that, this is, I think, I was able to participate in 2 of the meetings with them, and it was very apparent the just range of options. So I think, we've kind of scrape the surface here.
Yeah, for sure.
But have some good information to help launch us into a conversation of what our objectives are and what goals do we want to achieve as a board in potentially engaging with a land use consultant. So,
yeah, I think that the fact that there's a wide continuum also gives the board a lot of flexibility in what to do.
So I'd open it up for discussion along the board.
It sounded, I was just gonna say, it sounded like with all 3 options, you said that in any of those cases, someone was there, would take whatever the directive was or the recommendation was and start shopping it around. Does that mean that these land use people are also brokers or real estate professionals?
No, I didn't get that feeling that they would
Okay.
also act as
I
a
wasn't
broker. It was
sure.
just that the deliverable would be some options that could be shopped.
Could be, okay.
Yeah.
It wasn't that they're representing it
Right,
or anything
right.
like that, okay.
No, I do think it's a point to note, though, that while one potential deliverable is some aspect of a plan that could be shared
Okay.
with potential.
But that they're not representing that, too.
No.
Okay.
And in general, one of the interesting things about some of these consultants, particularly the one that's that Brian described as is the other end of the continuum, is that they generally seem to be used by somebody who's developing the land, not usually commissioned by a landowner such
Okay.
as we are. So
Got
that
it.
was an interesting angle to look at it from that perspective.
Yeah. Which makes me then question, had any of them, of the 3, had that kind of experience where it wasn't the developer that they were working for, that it was somebody who had, like maybe another, I don't know, public piece of land that, or not, you know what I mean, but a
Like, meaning,
parcel.
did they have experience with representing buyers?
Or sellers?
No, more like, yeah, somebody, like, I mean, yeah, how high up they went. Just you mentioning that they
Yeah.
were brought in already by a developer who was interested in that site. I just wondered if somebody who is going to be selling it has ever, if they had had experience with that.
They definitely have had experience in working with public entities, but some of the experiences that I glean from them are more, just to give an example of, you know, an area or a community or a city that the municipalities come together and they want to revitalize that city. And so the process then relates to the engagement of all the municipalities, all of the stakeholders in the area to determine how that revitalization could look and what
Okay.
facets are important. So from that perspective, but at that point,
helps.
yeah, at that point they seemed to be working a little bit differently than representing like someone like us who is the seller of land.
Okay.
Yeah.
When you say that you had met with 3 different people, 3 different companies, so are these 3 different options, or did multiple companies give the same option? So like, for example, when you're looking at number 3, the large scale comprehensive process for $150,000, did you have 2 companies that could
No.
do that? Or that
Yeah,
was-
so these were 3 companies and they each fit one of those approaches. So,
Okay.
like I think it's a good point, because if tonight the board said we like this approach, maybe the next step is to see if there's other companies that use that same approach or that engage in that same approach, so we're not just
Okay,
looking
because
at
it just
one.
seems
Yeah.
like if they can all do so much, maybe they just present it, here's a good approach to
Yeah, it was 3 companies all presented different approaches, and they literally fit the continuum.
Okay, so it wasn't
Yeah.
that you asked them questions, you asked what they
Yep.
came to you as to what they would present.
Tell us what work you do, tell us the scope of your work, tell us the process you typically go through.
So
Yeah.
in looking then at the large-scale comprehensive process, which I think is really key for community engagement, which moving forward, I think is something that we're looking at, having a better venue to do that. How will they choose people from all the different communities? Because I don't want it to be where you just have 2 people from one community, and that might not achieve what we need to achieve. So I'd love to have more information on that, to make sure that we do have a fair representation from all the communities feeding into LT as to what would be best.
So I asked that question, and the answer was that would be driven by the district. They facilitate it, but it would be driven by the district. So that's very open-ended process that could involve, you know, whatever stakeholders, whatever queries that would be a part of that focus group. That they don't have, and for good reason, they're not going to come into a district and say, you absolutely have to do, this is what your focus group's going to look like, these are the questions they're going to ask. They're going to work with the board to develop that.
Because my concern is when you're having, that you might have many more stakeholders in Willow Springs that want to be involved versus how many want to be involved in Western Springs. And that's where, how do we, you know, what would that look like? And just a little bit more information on that.
Yeah,
because I
you'd
want
have the
an
ability to
equitable
build that
process.
exactly how the district wants to build it.
Which I'm struggling with. I want an equitable process, but I'm struggling with $150,000 being spent. I mean,
Yeah.
especially when we look at
Yeah.
all the costs where we are, and we've done so far. That's my struggle with that is there another way to achieve that?
Well, and I wonder if that, like, if it feels like outside, like, not community engagement, but working with a firm that would fit, like, I feel like on the other side of this, you know, ideally, we're coming together with the Village of Willow Springs and working that together would be wonderful. So, you know, I think it's a hefty price tag, but
Are we
it
going
might
to
be-
achieve what we need to from that price tag? I
Right.
guess is my question. And what will that look like?
Is there, I mean, I'm glad to hear about the meeting this morning. Is there anything you can share that might be additive to the conversation that we're having right now?
Right, because like, how would this be different from what, if you've had a conversation with Will Springs this morning, like different from what they're doing?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, the big takeaway was that the Village of Willow Springs wants to collaborate with us where it makes sense to collaborate with us. They indicated that, you know, throughout last year. They're still indicating that now, and I hope that we reaffirmed our desire to likewise figure out how and where we collaborate. I think the question was raised at that meeting, like, do you have any ideas of where we could? And the response was kind of like, we're kind of in the process of trying to figure out who we're going to engage with and what our process is going to look like. Sounds like you're doing the same thing, and there will likely be some overlaps. And I think the goal is to figure out through, whatever process we undertake and whatever process Willow Springs undertake, is where's our common ground and how can we march forward together through that common ground. So I think it was, a positive first or continued step to doing just that, figuring out where our common ground is. They also indicated that there's desire in the community, there's excitement in the community to see that land developed the appropriate way and in a way that's going to be very beneficial to the community. And so, that's, in my mind, that's obviously what we're hoping to uncover through any engagement that we would undertake.
Well, I kind of have some questions. I mean, it's my understanding Willow Springs is responsible for doing the zoning for this property. And we can't technically put this on the market until it's zoned by the Willow Springs County, right? So hiring these land consultants right now, wouldn't it be a little premature because we don't know what zoning it's gonna wind up on, and that will curtail the scope of work and their approach? Therefore, we could wind up paying unnecessary dollars. That's one concern that I have. And if they are doing the work and they are hiring a land consultant because they have to zone it and they have vested interest, just like we do, to make sure that this land, that we share with the community to make sure it's done properly. Ultimately, the zoning is their responsibility, right? And we can't put it on sale until it's zoned. So I think that would be a first step. And then from my perspective, the land, hiring, the land consultants would come more heavily into play if we wanted to keep it. That's a good chunk of money, the $150K. I mean, we're trying to get money for construction improvements, right? I guess a question that I have for the school is, would that facility serve or offset any of that 30 million phase 2, construction contract? Because I thought that we wanted to sell so that we have big picture, we're focusing on the 30 million phase 2. So I guess the first question is, I'm new, right? Has that already been sealed? Can we make that facility offset some of those costs and those plans, So that's where I think a land consultant would come into play if we wanted to keep it. But personally, I feel that until Willow Springs is done with their research and zoning it, I feel like our hands are kind of tied. Is personally what I kind of tend to feel.
Yeah, I want to clarify the question you asked. So
Sure.
you said that, does the facility, the property or our current facility?
Well, okay, the one at stake.
The property.
So, okay, we have all these facility improvements that we want
Right.
to do to the facilities, right?
To our campuses.
To our campuses,
Yes,
correct.
yes, correct.
I understand that, but at some point, I haven't, without looking too much into the detail right now, because I don't have it ingrained in me, if that, some of that involves like, expanding a cross-country track, for example, is that facility that we own,
Property that we own.
the property that we own, sorry, is there, will that offset any of the facility improvements that we have here somehow? I know that it's facility, but if any of those needs that we have. At the end of the day, I still see, I know it's a fine line. We share that mutual interest in wanting to make sure that this, when we sell it, the property, that it goes to good use, but we only have so much control over it. I mean, Willow Springs is responsible for the zoning, and I know that we have to adhere to that. So that was the moratorium, right? They're hiring land consultants so that they're doing this so that they can properly zone it and then put those restrictions then on us, which would make it easier. And then we sell it. I mean, it's not easier, but it just seems a little prematurely, I guess. It's a lot of money, and it seems a little prematurely if we don't have the zoning identified.
Yeah, I think, well, so our understanding is that the ordinance simply places a moratorium on any additional zoning. So it doesn't prohibit the board from selling the property at current zoning right now.
Okay, and that's what I didn't have clear
yeah.
then. So then we could sell it at the current zoning,
Right.
but they're doing,
It just simply indicates that they are not going to have any discussions around zoning changes during the moratorium period.
So if a buyer came forward and said, we want to purchase this property, but it's what they're proposing is not within the current zoning code, they will not entertain it. The moratorium prevents that from moving forward. But if a buyer came forward wanting to buy the property right now, and it was within the current zoning, we could potentially, it sounds like we could proceed with that. The moratorium is through March of 2024. But I think just to jump in and.
I was going to say one more thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
And in addition to that, the ordinance also clarifies that they are going to also do their own study of the property.
Yeah.
And they have a desire to complete that study by December of 2023.
Willow Springs.
Yeah.
Willow Springs, right.
And so they indicated too, it was a long time ago that they did that zoning. So part of the zoning study, if I interpret it properly, was we need to take a look to see market conditions have changed, feasibilities have changed. There might be other uses for that land that we didn't even consider back when it was originally zoned for what it is current. So that study could potentially open up other opportunities for changes in the zoning. Likewise, it's not as the landowners of a parcel of land, and that's a sizable parcel of land, it's commonplace as for us to participate as the landowners in that discussion of the rezoning. So when we first brought the idea forward 2 weeks ago about engaging with a land use consultant, part of the conversation was it would help inform us too about the different feasibilities, the plausibilities of that land given the current market conditions. I certainly expect that there's going to be some overlap, but there may be some differences. And I guess from my perspective, that overlap of where we find common interests within our study and their study probably gives us a good grounding point to have conversations about how to move forward. Our study, I think one of the things I found interesting about all three consultants is that all three would all three would contain an appraisal that we would initiate of the current zoning, the land in its current zoned use, which is something that we've heard over and over again, and I'm just going to speak for myself, but it's certainly something that I would like to have had and I would like to have now. We've never done that. So that, to me, checks a very important box of getting an appraisal done on the land as it's currently zoned for. The other thing that again, speaking just for myself, that's a big objective, would be that it would do a market analysis at current market conditions of what some of the feasible options were. So we would get a knowledge base of what potentially could be considered on that land and some options. And again, I think their study is likewise looking to do similar things, presumably. And it would give us a nice sort of jumping off point for understanding where there's overlap and working towards some common ground to monetize that asset for the district, to get to your point about that money that we gain from the sale of the property would help fund some of the facility improvements that we can't fund even with our bond issue. Right. So that's important from that standpoint. But it would also monetize that property and its value. It unlock the value potentially for Willow Springs in a number of different ways that have yet to be explored. So this, to me, is a big missing chunk of what we didn't do previously because we were just responding to the situation at hand. This allows us to chart a new course, and hopefully a course whereby we can walk together down the road of making it a very positive impact for all parties concerned.
Okay, I mean, last meeting, I thought we did want to sell. right? And so, because we need money for that, the phase 2. But when I asked about the land consultant, I asked, are we selling or are we contemplating keeping, right? Because to me, I still thought land consultant, we might want to keep the land. That's probably why we want to explore it. And so I thought, we don't know yet. So have we made a decision that we are definitely selling? I thought it was at some point, but are we still
No, but
debating?
No, yeah, I think the idea of a land consultant, I don't necessarily look at it as like study means, land consultant means sell, or land consultant means no sell. To me, what land consultant is inform us, give us a knowledge base of what this property could be, and within those different options of what this property could be, it will help us identify. We still, as a board, can make the decision after, after looking at the land use, having conversations in a collaborative process with Willow Springs. There still might be a decision down the road that, for whatever reason, it doesn't make sense right now. But that decision would be based on a plethora of conditions and information that we don't have right now.
And I was trying to understand what you were saying, Navia. Were you saying, Elvia, sorry, my brain not working tonight. Were you saying, it sounded like you were even indicating like, and maybe that's what would come out of possibly this land use study too, is to see is this piece of land, while we deemed it's not necessary and desirable for another campus, so to speak, but is there some other use that the school could be taking advantage
That
of
we're not
or
thinking of.
participate?
Yeah.
Right, that would be a huge benefit to our students. In all communities. So it sounded like that's kind of where you were headed too. And I would assume, like, and I think back to what Dawn was saying too about what this person would bring to the table would be all of those options. Like, you could go down this path, there is this option, there's this option. That's something that we haven't had that
Explored.
discussion or had a very long, lengthy, like time. We haven't had the right amount of time to sit there and actually kind of discuss what all those vetted options would be, and bringing in some experts who would do those things, including like, traffic studies and understand the real estate market, probably be able to do some projections, find out what, kinds of tax benefits could be for other communities and stuff. All those things, that's information that we could really find beneficial to helping us to decide. But, so I think that's kind of what I'm hearing, and I was kind of hoping too, because I actually did wonder myself too, like, is there something
That we're missing.
we should be looking at
Yeah.
too, that, would be a benefit to our schools right now, using that property for our students potentially.
And I guess I just want a point of clarification, because one of the things that you said was that we couldn't sell it unless it's the current zoning, but it's my understanding we could sell it, and then it would be the buyer's responsibility to take care of the zoning. Pre-moratorium and current moratorium. Is that correct? Yes. Okay.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
And
That's why you build in feasibility and expiration periods when someone buys a property.
so I guess, because it's fresh in my head, and forgive my stupid story I'm going to tell you, but I'm moving my parents out of their house. They're selling their condo, and I'm moving into senior living. And so our realtor said, listen, spend $5,000, $6,000 on a fresh coat of paint. You're going to get your money back tenfold, right? And we did, and we sold it literally in a day. Was it the paint? Who knows? Did we get more money because of the paint? Nobody will ever know, right? But I guess, to my point is, if we do spend the money and we get all these things in that study, will that then produce something that we can give to a potential buyer that will get us more money? And I don't know if you have an answer to that, but I think that's an important part of the question as to whether or not we go with the higher option. I definitely.
That's a great question.
I like the idea of what that option is, in the community involvement, the appraisal, all those things. I like the deliverables on that. And when I look at that, because that $150,000, I was like, oh boy, that's a lot of money, right? But then I look at that in percentage of what the actual cost is, and I actually did a comparison to the paint, and it's It's not a lot, right? No, I mean, comparing the land sale and this study separately, the percentage from the paint in my house, like, it's not a lot. However, it is money that could be used elsewhere to do other things. So my only last point, at least, sorry, right now, or question is, to part of the public's questions last meeting, has Willow Springs already begun this process? Have they already, or is it too late that we could open up discussions about mutually agreeing upon somebody that could do that land study collaboratively?
Yeah, to answer your question, the indication was that they have not actually begun the process, but that we're actually working to try to identify a land use consultant or whoever it is that's going to facilitate their process. And the timing, I think, of the bigger option of 9 to 12 months is kind of a bit of a flag, because the timing, we asked the Village of Willow Springs if they were on time, even though they hadn't officially started, if they were on time and looking like the report would be done by the end of this year, and the answer was yes. We expect it to be done as of right now up to the end of this year. Calendar year, December, and that's what's outlined in the ordinance, that the study would come forward by December of the end of this year, December of 2023. In my mind, I'm already at 2024.
So do you know in their process, are they looking to get extensive community feedback within their study?
I don't have an answer to that, other than that they expect that there definitely will be community feedback. I just don't know where or how or what that looks like. And again, it sounds like they're still trying to vet out their process and identify somebody to do what it is that they would like to do. I think the one thing that kind of jumps off the page for me is that in each of these three scenarios, the appraisal for the land at its current zoning and the market analysis is a piece that's part of all three of these approaches. So it's something that is going to be there, and that gives us some definite concrete information that we don't have. We haven't had at all in any of our discussions. It also is probably the type of information that we would need to use to participate in their rezoning process. And since those are things that are happening in all three of those processes anyway, part of me says, shouldn't we just engage in those facets, like get those done, because they're going to be there anyway, which then would somewhat allow us to take a look and further flesh out what the rest of the process could look like and answer some of the questions that you all have raised tonight.
So all three of those firms are capable of doing that, just that basic step?
Of doing that, and it sounds like to some degree, they may even utilize like outside contract that work outside of it. Is that what your take was?
You're talking about just the appraisal?
Just the appraisal and the market analysis.
Yeah, I will say with reasonable confidence that all three of those companies could do both of those.
Yeah.
I can verify that, but I would be surprised.
I think I didn't.
Yep.
I wasn't with you on the last one, but I definitely heard that out of the two. So those are kind of hard points that we should be getting out of any of these options or anybody that we engage with.
But I don't know that you need to engage in a land use, if you're looking for an appraisal and, that kind of thing. I don't think we need to go through a firm to get that appraisal. I think you can do
And
that
for that
independently
money.
of that, and we could just give it different parameters. Is my thought on that. I don't think you need to pay a third party to facilitate that.
Right.
And countering to yours, which I understand with the paint and everything, that would be, I would say, assuming that we're voting to sell it and to move forward. But I think that has been very clear, and I want to make that clear. There's been no vote, there's been nothing that we want to sell it. This is to explore and to see, so I want to clarify that for everybody, that as a board, there's not been that discussion that we are selling it.
No.
And I would say, looking at, like, piggybacking on what you said, Carrie, looking at the best use for that. Maybe it's something really cool for LT that we've never even thought about, and it's come up, and that's the best use for everybody, and that's what the community wants if we were to engage with that.
Right,
So, I
so-
mean, oh, no, go on. It was gonna be, that was it.
Well, just to kind of add to this, I also still think that there needs to be extensive community feedback as a part of this, because the, concern even from the community that there wasn't extensive community feedback, and I'm hopeful that the Willow Springs assessment will include that. And/or if we are looking to do any further, I don't know that you need as Jill's saying, the consultant to help with just to getting the appraisal and this market information. I think you would need them extensively to help coordinate this extensive feedback loop from the community in each of the communities, which I think is very important that we haven't had in 15 years or 20 years, whenever it was last had come up.
And Michael, your comments are very specific. I just want to make sure I'm hearing you properly. To coordinate the feedback loop with respect to the community feedback surrounding the exploration of the land sale.
As part of the identification of if it even should be sold, or just their feedback or potential ideas that the community has, because again, that's what we've also heard loud and clear, that the community has not weighed in and provided any feedback. And just to go with just those two assessments and not have any community engagement and feedback incorporated, then I don't think that we're doing any justice in doing anything other than what we potentially might know already.
Right. No, thank you for making that, that comment. That's important. In each of the firms that we spoke with, we did talk about, as part of their process, do they engage with us, with the community, with the stakeholders, in whatever format we would outline, or if we're doing this in collaboration, whatever format that looks like. And they all said yes, that's something that they regularly do. So I think that's something that would need to be parsed out as part of the scope of the work. And it might be after we get the market analysis and the land appraisal, for that matter. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would really like to know if, to the extent the capabilities that these three firms have with being able to do the community engagement component of it, and getting input from all of our communities, and them being, that third-party perspective and just, facilitating it. I think that would be tremendous. I'd love to know, like I said, 150,000, yeah. I know, I thought the same thing in big picture, but it still is a lot, that we have so many needs that it's hard to just, not consider all the other priorities that we have too. So I think it'd be good to know if we have other choices and other options from a financial standpoint and an engagement standpoint.
And I think timing is really important too, because what they might propose, what that looks like when you have a year versus when you're trying to accomplish something in 3 to 4 months. You can engage in a lot of different ways. So what does that look like within those parameters too, so that we can track along with our community partners?
Okay. Go ahead.
And I would just say, I mean, I know, like, you're talking about Willow Springs engaging in community partners, but I think it's probably, without being part of any of those conversations, and I know it was just you as part of those conversations, but I can't imagine Willow Springs, who they're going to have be part of their community members, is going to be who our community members are going to be. Like, I don't imagine there's going to be full overlap on that. Like, is it Willow Springs saying they're going to engage in all of the LT community? Or is it just the Willow Springs community?
Yeah, so I think what I'm hearing the board say is that the board would value a broader engagement process on any study that we would embark on.
Right, because I don't feel like Willow Springs may be as broad as we would do.
Right.
I mean, is that correct to assume that?
I think that's an assumption, yeah. That's not something.
But the stakeholders are different, right?
Right, correct. Right, because I mean, Willow Springs is looking, I'm thinking, and I'm going to be assuming, I mean, for their community, I mean, because if Willow Springs is doing a full-on engagement of all communities, then that is something to look at, to be more collaborative. So I think that needs to be narrowed down, is who is Willow Springs engaging with versus who we are, because like you said, the stakeholders are different, I would assume. But I mean, I could be wrong.
Well, let me throw this out there. And when we think about engagement of all 11 of our communities in a process like that, what type of outputs, or I shouldn't say outputs, but what type of conversations do you all like start to imagine that would be going on with some of our, like, it's pretty clear to me what the engagement process would look at, like with the Willow Springs community, in terms of, potentially what that process would look like. What would you hope to gain out of the conversations with our other communities? Is it more input on, what is it input on?
What do they want us to do? Do they want
Right.
us to keep it? Do they want it to make it into a nature center? I mean, we heard so many people that came in, and they were from all different communities. We've heard sell it, we've heard, keep it as a nature center, hold on to it. What if, there's so many different things. So I can't say what it would be.
Huge stadium.
I would want
Yeah.
them to tell us. I mean, that would be what I would hope we would gain from a land use study and engagement with our community, is for them to tell us. Do they think, hey, I mean, I'm going to say the dreaded word of a referendum, but you know what, we want it to be the coolest science, I'm just making something up, like science place that it could ever be, and all the communities are like, that's awesome, and you know what, we don't have the funds for it, but you know what, all the communities say, let's make the funds for that. I mean, I don't know, because I can't come up with that, but I mean, that's where I'm seeing when we engage in our community, maybe when they have all these different ideas and there's knowledge, they could come up with 100 different things that we may not think of. So that's when I'm looking at engagement from all the community. It's not necessarily just to, is the best use if we're going to open this up. I mean, there's a much different thing from best use to best dollar amount we're going to get. Who knows what we're going to have, and if you have everybody involved in this, it might really surprise us. So I'm totally for a full engagement, but I also think, like Jill, you said, with the timing, it's not going to do us much good if we're getting the results back this time next year.
The only thing I would be cautious of, and I agree with everything you said, and I think you say it very eloquently. My only concern is it would have to be done in a way that was very deliberate and cautious, because what I would not want to see have happen is we're now pitting one community against the other. That's
a good point. I mean, I think the goal of all of us is to bring people together, to have it be more of a common
Yeah.
use. Like, let's
Yeah.
do better now going forward.
Yeah.
But we don't want it to be a war,
Yeah.
if you will, within a
100%.
focus group.
Right.
When you have 5 different communities and there's not a collaborative approach, and that's where I just am apprehensive
Yeah.
about how do we approach that going forward.
Right, but if each of these companies have done this kind of engagement, then they can provide examples of the kind of engagements to the stakeholders that they've done before, like likened similar to the situation that we're in. So if that's something that we can ask of them to bring back, that would be helpful. To
Right, because you said
understand.
like the number 1 was more of, everything I wrote down, it was more of for someone that would be developing the land. So I think that is the number 1 approach with the highest and best use, is secure a buyer and zoning and everything like that. That's for when you're developing the land. But I think the first question is, I think we have to back it up. It's not, does the community want the land developed? I think would be the first question to lead us on to different things.
And bearing in mind all along that there's that other 30 million plus phase 2 construction that has to, what does the community want to see as a priority, right? Do they want to see funds go into that, or are they not, like all of you have said, with this land study, will it generate so many cool ideas that they're willing to forego putting off those priorities, because funds are very limited. So if they're gonna go into using and keeping the land, doing something really cool, that's fine if that's the majority of what our community wants, right?
Okay.
But everybody's gotta bear in mind, funds are not infinite. right? I mean, so.
I mean, I just want to clarify that phase one that you're talking about, that 30 million, that
Phase
is.
2, isn't it?
Yeah, phase one is the first 30 million. So
That's
that's
our bond sale.
been,
That's
the
what the
board's
bond
discussed
sale.
that,
Yes.
provided authorization
Yeah,
to
big-
move forward with bid
yes.
specs. The planning is well involved. So that's
gotcha.
absent of this property discussion. It's
Um,
phase two,
that
which
we're-
is,
right.
which is also outlined. It's 120 million.
Okay, there
Yeah.
we go.
That's,
Thank you. Thank you
that's
for
what,
clarifying
yeah,
that,
just
right.
want to clarify that.
No, I appreciate that. I'm throwing numbers left and right that don't make sense, so I appreciate it.
No, you're fine.
Yeah,
You're-
but I mean, I just, just big picture.
Yeah.
Like, I have really, listening to all of you has really clarified and added clarity, and, I could see things differently, like, than when I first went through it, and I could definitely see the value. I think you guys brought up some very good points. I just think, to everyone's point, we just gotta keep the big picture in mind, right?
Yeah.
Because there's still something that's gonna be foregone, how we choose to go about this one.
So let me take a stab at kind of summarizing where I think I hear the board, speaking, make sure we're all speaking with this with one voice. I hear that one of the biggest priorities of the boards is to identify a community engagement process that involves all of our communities as part of any engagement that we would do with a land use consultant. I hear that that's a big priority. I also hear the concern on timing that we'll have to kind of work through. A check-in point with all of you, is there interest on the board's behalf to, in the interest of time, to engage with somebody to do an appraisal of the land at its zoned use? Let's stop right there. Just, can I have some comments about that?
I don't feel it's necessary at this time.
You don't want to do an appraisal?
I don't feel we need to, because we haven't talked about selling it at this point in time, and that would come in with, I would rather have the community to just take money out of it. What would we do? And we've already had, we haven't had that decision to move forward to sell it. So I think, would we sell it without the community engagement, because a lot could change in a year? If we're looking at 9 months to a year, is it gonna be best used to have that appraisal done now, or in a year later when it's outdated and things can change? I mean, because we know that, there's been discussion about the interest rates, like if you were to make it residential, have gone up so high that it may not have the same value. But who knows where we are in a year with interest rates, and it might be, Lord willing, back down to 3%. And then it's got a whole lot more value to it. So I think that's really a timely process with the value of it. So I don't know if it'd be premature to do that now. So I want to be very thoughtful in the money that we're spending.
Okay. Other comments?
I am in favor. It's information we haven't had to get an appraisal within the zoning. It's at least a ballpark, and we were kind of extrapolating from the last appraisal, like what it might be, but I also think that's important for our community to know. It's not infinite, there are restrictions with it. I mean, that's the whole conversation. So I would be in favor of understanding what that is. I feel like that is like the first thing I would want to do. I know that the markets would fluctuate, but it's been a really big missing piece of information.
So it's sort of like establishing a baseline is what you're saying, because
Thank you.
Again, you're not, so it's like taking a data point in one piece of time, being able to compare it then to a later when or
Yeah.
if anything should
Yes.
change.
Yes.
Well, a market analysis and an appraisal, isn't that something that a realtor on its own can do? And would it be cheaper? Like,
Yeah,
just for those two pieces that I hear are kind of critical?
I think it could be, but if you don't mind, can we hang on the appraisal just for a second more?
Oh, no,
For
yeah, sure.
just because the next point, I do want to go around and kind of talk about the market analysis. But Carrie,
No, I think that was really my point, was just that it's sort of like sets, from what I think, the value that I could see it, is providing a data point, just as a baseline.
okay.
But again,
For
without
the-
the community engagement and without having that other pretty comprehensive, extensive engagement with, a firm or someone else to orchestrate that, I feel like, that's such an important part of it that, I guess I'm trying to figure out if how else we would consider, or why else we would consider that appraisal outside of it just being yet another data point, which, you know, might be okay. I guess I'm not sure that I have a really strong feeling about how
think-
that would influence or change anything.
So like for community engagement too, if that is shared,
Okay.
is it worth,
I
you
can see
know,
that.
yes, Board of Education,
This
go
is-
explore
right.
something within the zoning, this is worth it, the ROI that you're talking about. Or it doesn't get us very far and
then
wait
you
and see what
have to
happens in
look.
5 years when the market shifts.
Okay.
It
I
could
don't know.
influence the way that they think or
Yeah.
the direction.
Or the
in which
information they
they're
should
thinking.
share, right, with, right, their perspective.
I just want to make sure I take good notes. That was a yes then?
I was
Perfect.
gonna, yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty insignificant cost, so, yeah.
I was on the line of absolutely, let's get an appraisal. What, Jill, what you shared is, I hadn't thought of, and it's a very good point. But I also think that what we've heard from a lot of people is that they just don't know what the value is. And I think having that number to engage the conversation with the community is gonna be a really good starting point to the conversation. So I'm leaning more towards let's get an appraisal.
But I mean, I'm just gonna say you can, a market analysis, I mean, maybe, John, what is your understanding of what the difference is between an appraisal and a market analysis? So one would be more, I mean, I think, let's clarify what we're talking about, and what the expectations are of
Yeah.
that.
So my understanding of the market analysis is that it would look at possible options, feasible options of what the uses could be on that land, given the current market conditions, current market trends. So in the end, it would be, I'm envisioning it as a report with options, with values, with considerations that kind of details out what could happen on that land with some feasibility, not necessarily, pie in the sky, but like, according to market conditions, market trends, where the appraisal is a more discrete piece of that, which I think would probably, I think that's separate of the appraisal. I think, all of this is speculative projection,
So my
right?
understanding is, an appraisal is, like, we have houses now. Your
Right.
house could appraise for 700,000, but it could sell for 900,000. So that would be the market analysis with supply and demand, because you could have a property appraised for 700,000. I mean, I know I'm talking residential versus commercial, but when you're looking at that, so that's what an appraiser is saying, based upon sales, this is what I would think it would do. Market analysis is different, because that's based upon what has sold.
They're both speculative projections, right?
Correct.
That's basically using market information, market trends to assign a value that's speculative based on what the conditions are at that moment. I think the difference between the appraisal and the market analysis is the appraisal would be discrete and exactly to where the zoning is right now. It gives us a piece of information that we have not had in any of our conversations over the past X amount of months about that property. I think it's probably a germane piece of information that it's time for us to have personally. The market analysis is going to consider all of the market trends and variabilities to hypothesize or project other uses.
And I don't, that's not how I'm viewing it too. I'm using like you had, Elvia, you had chimed in, like a market analysis would come from like a broker, or an appraiser would come from an appraisal company.
Well, the market analysis that we talked about, and Brian, I know you had some things that would,
Maybe we're
that they
talking- I just
mentioned
wanna
that
make
would be
sure what are we
considered. I'm
talking
not
about,
sure
because
it's
that's what you had
exactly
done.
the
No,
same
you're right.
thing.
Because this
Yeah.
is different from the land use consultants and
This
what
is
they're.
part of them.
Part of it.
It's part of something that they would do as part of an engagement.
So what we
but
heard.
No, it seems like we're unbundling. We're talking like maybe not looking at the land use consultants, but then looking at appraisal, then looking at the market analysis. But I don't, like, what, is it under the scope of the land use consultant, or is this now going separate outside and us looking at getting the appraisal ourselves and doing a separate market analysis ourselves?
I think that is the question, to see if the board has any appetite while we're figuring out if we want to and who we want to engage with, and what some of those other levers would be that have been discussed tonight, and what those would look like, how those would flesh out. that this potentially doing an appraisal and/or seeing if we can unbundle the market analysis gives us information in a shorter timeline that meets the same sort of timeline that potentially is related to the ordinance, and allows us that information to be armed with, sooner versus later. And we can definitely ask Brian to go and garner more information, dig deeper into these land use consultants for the whole shebang. But I'm trying to get a sense of whether or not it makes sense, even from a timing perspective, to try to pull these out and unbundle them and do those more expeditiously.
One of the things that I heard from the companies, this idea of a market analysis, they use terms like traffic study, environmental study, looking at the regulatory environment. Those are the types of things they threw on the table to say this is what a market analysis would include.
Well, it's different than,
Yeah.
that's, to me, those are different than a market analysis, because when I just heard market analysis and appraisal, I'm thinking more basic terms, and that's, I'm sorry for the confusion, but I think Jill and I started the unbundling because we kind of heard the same thing in a way with
I feel like
appraisal.
they're almost interchangeable.
Yes,
And
yes.
that's why, and that's where I guess maybe we don't understand the terms of what they're meaning by, that's why I'd asked you what is your
I would say
understanding
the
of
other
them?
really simple way, from my understanding, is that the market analysis builds upon the appraisal. Like the
Yeah,
appraisal is
appraisal,
one level, the
then-
market analysis is going to give a little more complex information than just the appraisal.
But this isn't the typical, I wouldn't consider all those areas that were lumped into market analysis, market analysis. So for me, when I heard all of you say market analysis and appraisal, I thought, well, if that's what everybody's after, those are typically not high-ticket items. I'm like, why are we paying so much for that if that's primarily what we care about? But when I just heard you roll out the traffic study, the
I
congestion,
think
all of
that's
that,
much different
That-
than
and
what.
that's a lot
The
more
environmental
inclusive.
impacts,
It's totally different, in my opinion, right? I
And-
wouldn't roll it up under market analysis.
And I can certainly dig into this more, but I'm guessing what I would find is that there's different levels of market analysis, right? There's probably a wide range of continuum, even looking at that concept.
But I think then the question we have to ask is those that would be engaged in the engagement, are they worried, like, will they use what we would find in, if we're gonna go with the market analysis being all encompassing of what you had mentioned, would they use what we found in the appraisal and would they use what we found in the market analysis helpful to the conversation that they would have regarding the land? I think that's the question that we need to ask. Is that going to be where, okay, you can sell it for $20 million and it's gonna have this, this, and this with the market analysis? Is that gonna be helpful to the conversation as to the community focus groups? And is that gonna be relevant to what they're talking about? And will they use that? Because if they're not gonna use that and it's not gonna be relied upon, then I don't know that we need
Wait,
to do it
just to
this
clarify,
way.
who's going to use what?
The community focus groups?
Yep.
Will they use and have that information?
In the market analysis?
No, will the
As part
community
of the
focus groups
engagement.
take the
Provide that
appraisal?
information to.
Right,
focus
and
Oh, yeah.
take that
Members, yes.
to drive
Yeah.
their conversation
Yes.
and that conversation around it. Because that to me would be kind of interpreting it rather, because I'm looking at community engagement as a bigger picture.
Yep.
Maybe with, like, hey, in a perfect world, this is, we want to not have any environmental impact. We want it to be net zero. I'm just, you know what I mean? We want it to not have it be, we don't want to have 4 stoplights put in, and make it a traffic jam, or we need to widen the, I'm just throwing things out. But, so would the community focus groups from all of that rely upon that information? Because if they weren't, and it's not going to be relevant to them, then it's not probably something we would want to do right now.
I think if the board wanted to include that in the focus group, the board could include that in the focus group.
Yeah.
Like, again, those are undefined. Those would be developed through a collaborative process with the board.
Yeah,
I
those
mean,
would be.
Those
yeah.
could be built however you want to build them,
Okay.
and include whatever information.
But then we're looking at, we're not getting into the time of, like, we're now to 9 to 12 months, we're including all this, because it probably is going, if you're gonna do traffic studies and everything like that, you're probably not looking at even having the market analysis back. I would just, probably for a couple of months. I mean, they're not turning it in 4 weeks.
Yeah,
I'm
let me go back to my notes here. Actually, one firm looked at 60 days on that to do,
Yeah.
30 to 60 day timeline to do the market analysis.
Okay, so you would do, so that brings us, but if we're not voting on it tonight, correct?
It's up to the board.
Yeah, that's.
Okay, so that brings us to like the end of October.
Mhm.
And then if we're looking at going into a December date, so let's say we get the market analysis, can we turn everything with community engagement, waiting upon this piece to have it be done by December, which would be, seems like the goal that we were looking at.
Like
Well, I
me-
think that's the question too. You know,
Right.
what does that engagement look like within maybe 3 different timelines? Like by December, maybe by March, and then, you know,
Yeah.
open-ended.
Yeah. I heard, I'm sorry to belabor this, but I'm going to go back to the appraisal. Where are we all at now? Jill, you gave your opinion. Carrie, you gave your opinion. Elvie, I haven't heard yours yet. JBD, I heard yours. Tim, I heard yours. Michael?
You haven't heard it.
No,
but,
I haven't heard it. That's why I'm going to you.
Right now, I mean, I think that it would be a piece to use if you're looking at a comprehensive study, not just one piece. Not just do it just to have the appraisal,
Okay.
but that it's used in a multiple areas of evaluation.
Okay. Well, Elvia, do you have any more thoughts on the appraisal of
I
whether or not?
guess when you say appraisal, I don't mean to beat a dead horse, but you say you want to focus on the appraisal. You mean how to use the land consultant just to do the appraisal? Or?
No, just if we wanted to initiate just an appraisal on the land at its zoned use, which is something we've heard over and over and over again. We heard it again tonight. That's been a missing piece from the conversations that we've had before, because we know that that's going to be part of any process. So the thinking, and what I'm trying to get a sense from everyone is, do we want to fast track that piece out of the consultant work just to have that done, have that piece of information?
I'm curious to see how much they would charge just for an appraisal. I mean, to me, an appraisal is not a big ticket item, so I wouldn't see. I think there's value in doing it, especially, again, in my opinion, I think it's a small ticket item considering, you know, the pricing that they have quoted. So I wouldn't. Yeah, I mean, I think it's worth it considering the price, depending on what they come back with. I'm curious.
Brian, do you remember the cost of the appraisal in May of 2022?
I don't right now, but we can get that information.
Isn't it about 7?
I thought it was around 5.
5 to 7.
I
somewhere.
remember.
We-
5 to
Yeah, we can look it up.
700?
We can look it up.
5 to 7,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
7,000? Okay.
It's
And I
safely going to be between 5 to 10,000 to do
Five
it.
to 10,000.
Appraisal at current
Okay.
zoning. We can get an estimate for you though.
I'm
a
not
better
saying that
estimate.
I'm opposed to the appraisal, I'm just saying I want to have a better idea as to what are we doing before.
How it fits in.
And how that, exactly, of how it fits in, and what will that plan look like? Because if we just do it in the abstract, is that going to even be helpful if we're not, of how that's going to engage? So I would rather have a more comprehensive picture of what the plan's gonna look like. And I would, but I also don't want to just have another number floating out there that might be arbitrary when we haven't even made a decision of whether or not to sell the land or how we're going to sell it or do
Yeah.
that.
So I'm not hearing enough consensus from the board to suggest that we should take any vote today. It sounds like what we should do, there's been lots of great conversation, lots of questions, lots of feedback here. It sounds like what the board would ask of you, Dr. Waterman, is to bring back more information, put this back on our meeting 2 weeks from now.
Okay.
To share more information about some of these facets, how they would relate to each other, and kind of the one of the big items would be not a little, but more information fleshed out on what an engagement process could look like and types of firms that would do
Find
it.
out costs too.
Yep, costs and-
Probe and get some other estimates from those.
Yeah.
So like costs of what?
Like what that community engagement, to facilitate that and to pull together all of the data that they collect and the presentation and provide really some significant information and input to the board from the communities. What would that entail? If they're not involved in making any kind of projections or options, but facilitating that discussion, I think would be really, really helpful. And maybe that would be a smaller slice of the pie for them to do.
Just the engagement piece is what you're saying.
Well, I think that that will likely be one of the largest dollar parts. If they're
Okay.
doing a community
Focus
stakeholder-wide,
groups to run it, yeah.
Yeah, that's,
that's the largest.
and that's the
cost.
estimate that came back at about 150,000.
Right, I know that, I guess, but you said that was one firm that provided that, correct?
Maybe
So I'd be
itemize.
curious to see what other firms would be doing, and also, like, if they said that that was a 9 to 12 month engagement, maybe some other firm would be like, 3 to 6 months is really all we would need, or 3 to 4 months is all we need
That's a
to
good.
pull this together.
See, like, there are other ways to do it on it.
That's
And what
what-
is, if we,
Yeah.
if we compress the time that would be spent on this, what are the options and what does that look like? Because I think the most important thing for me is the community engagement.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
So I'm gonna look to see if there are any firms that can do a community engaged process cheaper and much shorter timeframe.
I mean, I don't know,
Right?
that- I mean,
Well,
Well,
just
he-
ask,
and I
or
wanna be
what-
very
how would
upfront,
you go
where I
about
don't
it?
anticipate getting, what firms are gonna do is they go through a lot of legwork to produce proposals. You start asking them to give details on what they're gonna do, now they're giving away their work, right? So they're not gonna do that unless the board commits to, we're gonna work with you. Now, I think that might be.
Well, then I
we've
guess.
I'll-
the
but I'll
question-
try.
We could, but also, even going back to these firms, to say, what does your community engagement look like, short-term and long-term? Like, they gave a cost
Yeah.
for long-term. What would you do? Would you do phone interviews? Would you do surveys? Or would you still hold things in person, but just do smaller? I don't think that's out of turn to ask.
So I have an answer to that. So the
Okay,
one
great.
firm said they would look at 10 to 12 different focus groups. Some of them would be individual people, like
Okay.
key stakeholders, individual, all the way to a town hall meeting
Okay.
and everything in between.
Okay, so that.
Again, what we heard was, we will build this how the board wants to build it. So
Yeah.
like, there's going to be a ton of flexibility, because there should be, right? I don't think, and this is just me, I don't think the board wants a company that's gonna come in and lay a plan on the table and say, this is what you do. You want a company that's going to partner with you and work with you to develop questions, to structure out how it looks like, and you guys wanna drive that. You don't want the company to drive that.
But where
And
I
that's what
was-
we've heard, that's what we've heard.
But where I was confused, Brian, is where it sounded like that the third firm, the one that was at the $150,000 price tag, was the only one that said that they would do the level of community engagement.
Yeah, so I can
Yes.
definitely go back and see if there's other
So
firms.
that, I think that's for me
at
what
that
was the
pri- yeah.
missing piece, like, did
Yep.
these other firms say that we would do this community engagement? And to
Yep.
what extent at that price point, and
Yeah.
how does that compare, you
Right.
know?
I think to sum it up, the learnings that I think we can walk away with from this conversation, the initial, obviously, there's lots that we can glean, but I think you came in here and presented 3 very different sets of information and
Right.
parameters.
Yep.
Upon meeting those 3 firms.
Right.
Now that we have an understanding that one of the priorities that the board has is within the community engagement process, I
Right.
think we're asking you to look outward.
Yep,
and
so now I'll
and
look for
get
some other options for that.
options
Yep.
that have, a community engagement process,
Yep.
that we might be able to consider it against the firm that we already
Yep.
spoke with, or,
Yep.
a couple of them.
Yep.
Because I'm sure that there's a whole plethora of different ways that,
Okay.
somebody can go about that.
Yep.
And probably has gone about that in different ways.
I would just like to add, I would look at different options and timelines. Because I think that's really key. Because, you could have, because this firm 3 might say, we could only do it with a 9 to 12-month timeline to do it properly. But firm 1 might be like, oh yeah, we can do some engagement and have a good representation and have it back to you in 90 days.
Yeah.
I mean, that seems probably optimistic, but,
Yeah.
do you know what I'm saying? I think timelines is, would be more concerned about timelines than the price. Because to make sure we can achieve what we want to achieve, because if we're spending $150,000, but we're not getting what we need and it's too late, what good does it do us?
Right, okay.
All right, and I get that it's up to us to determine what we want to do, but we haven't seen what, maybe that you've seen. So we only are getting the summary that you provided. So we don't know what other services and have not seen on what they offer as their scopes. So that's why it's a little bit hard for us to determine what we want to see, because we don't know.
Would
We
the
don't
board
have,
be
like,
interested
any
in bringing companies to present?
No,
at a
I
board
don't
meeting?
know that that's necessary.
Yeah, I think
That's an option.
to answer that, Michael, there was not, the summary that, or that little bug that's flying around.
All right.
Yeah. The summary is pretty much what we saw. I mean, to Brian's point earlier, they don't bring in all sorts of examples of how they've done the focus groups, the questions, because, and we kind of pushed some of them because they want the engagement first.
Well, I understand, like, not questions, but at least if we're gonna pay somebody $150,000,
Yeah.
they should be providing a little bit more detail on what their scope and how they go about the process, especially as it relates to what our objectives are.
Yeah.
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 I think we need
Yes,
some
that's what
standard,
I'm-
I think that this was discovery and it's great information, and you were learning, you know, you were gathering information, but I think we got enough now to come up with a set of parameters that we want and ask the standard questions to everyone so that we can compare. I think everyone here wants to see kind of like compare apples to apples, and the only way to do that is to ask the same standard questions, and I think now we have a good approach.
Well, I think we have, what we didn't have before is we didn't know where the board's priorities were. We know
Yeah.
where the board's priorities were.
And we didn't
So-
understand what a land use consultant
Yeah,
exactly
totally.
was
This
gonna
was-
do.
this
So that
was-
was,
yep.
helpful
Yep.
information gathering. But now that we can understand some of the scope, we want more details. If they're gonna tell us
Let's
it's gonna
talk about
cost
what
this,
that
we
looks
want the
like on
details of
September
that.
5th, because I want to be very clear on what I'm bringing back. So do we want to have companies come present on September 5th?
No.
I don't think we need
Okay.
that.
Would they be able to submit just
writing?
a written proposal
Yeah.
or line items, like just put pen to paper on some of this?
So I had 2 of the 3 companies tell me that they would not do that unless they were identified as the last company.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Yeah.
Now, they've given us they've given us materials, which we could share with the board, but it's
Like website
it's
materials.
marketing
It's like
material,
what
it's
you would-
essentially marketing materials.
So it's not like an RFP?
Some are a little more detailed.
Wouldn't
So-
you
I'd like
think
to
it
see
should
their
be an
marketing
RFP?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I mean, whatever they gave.
I can share that with the board tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a starting.
So the materials that were shared with us, I'll share that with the board tomorrow.
Thank you.
And then maybe over the next week, after reviewing that, give me some thoughts on what, in addition to that, what you would like to see on September 5th. Is it just a discussion, or is it a presentation?
The only other, and I don't know if I missed it, but did you guys vet them before you reach out? Like, there's probably 30 of them in the Chicagoland area. Did you guys just look for the ones that had higher ratings, or?
No, we just had a recommendation from district council on different players in this game. Yep. So that, to the point earlier, like, this was a starting point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can vet 3 more firms, 10 more firms, 300 more firms,
I don't
whatever
feel like we
the
need-
board would like.
I don't feel like a
Yeah.
strong thing that you need to vet more firms. I would vet more of the process.
Of the approach of that community engagement, yeah.
Absolutely.
And
As
now
long
we
as
know
they're-
that.
As long as, it sounds like they've already been vetted through some reliable sources.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, then, again, that was just the initial starting point for, hey, here's some firms that do land use consulting work.
And thank you for.
And I would say too, like, if the
those
board
had,
has ideas on land use consultant firms, email them to me. We can have them come out and, again, I can't say this clearly enough. This process has to be driven by the Board of Education.
Right.
So if you guys want something as part of this process, then that's what we need to do.
Okay,
Thank you.
yes.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Okay, moving on, we've now reached our consent agenda portion of our meeting. Our consent agenda includes the following items: payments of bills and financial statements for LTHS and LADSI for the months of June and July 2023, human resources items from LTHS and LADSI, business service items, bid recommendations for multifunction school activity buses, student services items, including 2023-2024 school resource officer service agreement, LaGrange, and authorization of superintendent to appoint a hearing officer, review and approval of the meeting minutes, open and closed sessions, review of closed session minutes to determine if the minutes should remain confidential, and review and destruction of verbatim recordings of closed sessions, existing verbatim recordings that are 18 months or older in accordance with the Illinois Open Meetings Act, which are listed in the superintendent's memo, overnight student travel request approvals, and donations. Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
Sorry, do we have a discussion on any of these before we, or do we do that after?
You
No,
have to pull them up.
Yeah, if you, is there,
In the packet.
it's, everything is in the packet. Is there something you wanted to?
Just a point of clarification,
Yeah.
the renewal of the school resource officer services agreement has a typo. It said the district and village has determined that compensation for the 2023-24 extended term. So
24,
I don't
instead
think
of
we're going
22,
into
yeah.
a contract for the next 400 years.
No. And honestly, so my plan is, I've already shared both of our recommended agreements for SRO and reciprocal reporting to both Western Springs and LaGrange police departments. We're waiting for their village municipal attorneys to return them to us. As soon as we receive those, I'll be bringing those back to the board, hopefully in September. Those will supersede this agreement. And it actually outlines in that agreement that those will supersede that.
Okay.
So.
But we can motion to approve the consent agenda, given the
With
correction.
modification- with
the
modification,
modification,
yep.
the type of
To
modification.
2024.
To 2024 for the school resource officer service agreement. Good
Yep.
catch on that, Tim,
Yep.
thank you. Okay, so given that, can we have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented with the exception just discussed?
So moved.
Second.
Marilyn, will you please call the roll?
Member Rita Daniels,
Yes.
Member Dillon,
Yes.
Member Rush,
Yes.
Member Nava,
Yes.
Member Thomas,
Yes.
Member Alvarez,
Yes.
Member O'Hare.
Yes. Okay. The final item is public participation. This is the second opportunity for audience members to give comments and feedback to the Board of Education for anyone who signed up during the meeting. Marilyn, do we have anyone signed up?
Yes,
Okay, will you please call our first speaker?
Becky Lawrence.
Okay.
Hi, everybody.
Hi,
Becky
Becky.
Lorenz from 103 Asset LaGrange. Just two items. The first, just to let you know that the Mosaic project is happening. And a few people here have signed up for, or been at one of the Mosaic tile laying sessions. We're having them this week, Tuesday through Friday, next week, Monday, Wednesday in the afternoon, and on the 9th of September. So I just encourage you, if you have any interest at all, or if you could have any students that would be interested, to check out our website, Community Diversity Mosaic Project. We'll get you to the sign up. And we're looking for volunteers to come, and they teach you how to break tiles, and you get to smash tiles, and it's a lot of fun. And we're going to be creating this mosaic that's going to be on the community center. So just update on that. And then also, we are having our annual Unity Rally on September 10th. And we're actually honoring someone in this room for their community service. And I don't want to embarrass anyone, so I won't say who, but check it out. I'll be getting you a flyers that you can put out to the community. So encourage everybody to come. And our theme this year is the importance of belonging. And I believe someone from your school is going to come and talk about what LT has done to help include everyone. So thank you.
Thank you, Becky. Excellent. Thank you.
That's it.
Okay. The board will not be adjourning to closed session. That concludes tonight's business. Can we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Our meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.
You have a great night.
School year.
And school
Kick it
year.
off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.